A medical device is an instrument, apparatus, implant, in vitro reagent, or similar or related article that is used to diagnose, prevent, or treat disease or other conditions, and does not achieve its purposes through chemical action within or on the body. Whereas medicinal products achieve their principal action by pharmacological, metabolic or immunological means. Medical devices act by other means like physical, mechanical, or thermal means. Medical devices vary greatly in complexity and application. Examples range from simple devices such as tongue depressors, medical thermometers, indisposable gloves to advanced devices such as computers which assist in the conduct of medical testing, implants, and prostheses. The design of medical devices constitutes a major segment of the field of biomedical engineering. The global medical device market reached roughly $209 billion in 2006. Design, prototyping, and product development. Biomedical device product manufacturing is a long process requiring robust SOPs and guidelines for production. These days, with the aid of CAD or modeling platforms, the work is now much faster, and this can act also as a tool for strategic design generation as well as a marketing tool. Failure to meet cost targets will lead to substantial losses for an organization. In addition, with global competition, the R&D of new biomedical devices is not just a necessity. It is an imperative for biomedical device manufacturing companies. The realization of a new design can be very costly, especially with the shorter product life cycle. As technology advances, there is typically a level of quality, safety and reliability that increases exponentially with time. For example, initial models of the artificial cardiac pacemaker were external support devices that transmits pulses of electricity to the heart muscles via electrode leads on the chest. The electrodes contact the heart directly through the chest, allowing stimulation pulses to pass through the body. Recipients of this typically suffered infection at the entrance of the electrodes, which led to the subsequent trial of the first internal pacemaker, with electrodes attached to the myocardium by thoracotomy. Future developments led to the isotope power source that would last for the lifespan of the patient. Definitions. European Union legal framework and definition based on the new approach. Rules that relate to safety and performance of medical devices were harmonized in the EU in the 1990s. The new approach, defined in a European Council resolution of May 1985, represents an innovative way of technical harmonization. It aims to remove technical barriers to trade and dispel the consequent uncertainty for economic operators, to facilitate free movement of goods inside the EU. The core legal framework consists of three directives. Directive 93/85 EEC regarding active implantable medical devices. Directive 93/42 EEC regarding medical devices. Directive 98/79 EC regarding in vitro diagnostic medical devices. They aim at ensuring a high level of protection of human health and safety and the good functioning of the single market. These three main directives have been supplemented over time by several modifying and implementing directives, including the last technical revision brought about by Directive 2007/47 EC. Directive 2007/47 EC defines a medical device as any instrument, apparatus, appliance, software, material or other article, whether used alone or in combination, together with any accessories, including the software intended by its manufacturer to be used specifically for diagnostic and/or therapeutic purposes and necessary for its proper application, intended by the manufacturer to be used for human beings for the purpose of diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, treatment, or alleviation of disease. Diagnosis, monitoring, treatment, alleviation of, or compensation for an injury or handicap. Investigation, replacement, or modification of the anatomy or of a physiological process. Control of conception. This includes devices that do not achieve their principal intended action in or on the human body by pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means, but may be assisted in their function by such means. The government of each member state must appoint a competent authority responsible for medical devices. The competent authority is a body with authority to act on behalf of the member state to ensure that member state government transposes requirements of medical device directives into national law and applies them. The CA reports to the Minister of Health in the member state. The CA in one member state has no jurisdiction in any other member state, but exchanges information and tries to reach common positions. In the UK, for example, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency acts as a CA. In Italy it is the Ministero Salute. Medical devices must not be mistaken with medicinal products. In the EU, all medical devices must be identified with the CE mark. In September 2012, the European Commission proposed new legislation aimed at enhancing safety, traceability, and transparency. Definition in United States by the Food and Drug Administration: medical machine, contrivance, implant, in vitro reagent, or other similar or related article, including a component part, or accessory that is recognized in the official national formulary, or the United States Pharmacopoeia, or any supplement to them, intended for use in the diagnosis of disease or other conditions, or in the cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease, in man or other animals, intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals, and does not achieve any of its primary purpose through chemical action within or on the body of man or other animals, and does not depend on metabolic action to achieve its primary purpose. In August 2013, the FDA released over 20 regulations aiming to improve the security of data in medical devices, in response to the growing risks of limited cybersecurity. On September 25, 2013, the FDA released a draft guidance document for regulation of mobile medical applications, to clarify what kind of mobile apps related to health would not be regulated, and which would be. Definition in Canada by the Food and Drugs Act. The term medical devices, as defined in the Food and Drugs Act, covers a wide range of health or medical instruments used in the treatment, mitigation, diagnosis or prevention of a disease or abnormal physical condition. Health Canada reviews medical devices to assess their safety, effectiveness, and quality before authorizing their sale in Canada. Classification. The regulatory authorities recognize different classes of medical devices based on their design complexity, their use characteristics, and the potential for harm if misused. Each country or region defines these categories in different ways. The authorities also recognize that some devices are provided in combination with drugs, and regulation of these combination products takes this factor into consideration. Canada. The Medical Devices Bureau of Health Canada recognizes 4 classes of medical devices based on the level of control necessary to assure the safety and effectiveness of the device. Class 1 devices present the lowest potential risk and do not require a license. Class 2 devices require the manufacturer's declaration of device safety and effectiveness, whereas Class 3 and IV devices present a greater potential risk and are subject to in-depth scrutiny. A guidance document for device classification is published by Health Canada. Canadian classes of medical devices correspond to the European Council Directive 93/42, EEC devices. Class 4 generally corresponds to Class 3. Class 3 generally corresponds to Class IIB. Class 2 generally corresponds to Class IA, and Class 1 generally corresponds to Class 1. Examples include surgical instruments, contact lenses and ultrasound scanners, orthopedic implants and hemodialysis machines. and cardiac pacemakers. United States under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the U.S. The classification procedures are described in the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21, Part 860. The U.S. FDA allows for two regulatory pathways that allow the marketing of medical devices. The first, and by far the most common, is the so-called 510 process. A new medical device that can be demonstrated to be substantially equivalent to a previously legally marketed device can be cleared by the FDA for marketing as long as the general and special controls, as described below, are met. The vast majority of new medical devices enter the marketplace via this process. The 510 pathway rarely requires clinical trials. The second regulatory pathway for new medical devices is the pre-market approval process, described below, which is similar to the pathway for a new drug approval. Typically, clinical trials are required for this pre-market approval pathway. Class 1. General controls. Class 1 devices are subject to the least regulatory control. Class 1 devices are subject to general controls, as are Class 2 and Class 3 devices. General controls include provisions that relate to adulteration, misbranding, device registration and listing, pre-market notification, banned devices, notification, including repair, replacement, or refund, records and reports, restricted devices, and good manufacturing practices. Class 1 devices are not intended to help support or sustain life or be substantially important in preventing impairment to human health, and may not present an unreasonable risk of illness or injury. Most Class 1 devices are exempt from the pre-market notification, and a few are also exempted from most good manufacturing practices regulation. Examples of Class 1 devices include elastic bandages, examination gloves, and handheld surgical instruments. Class 2. General controls with special controls. Class 2 devices are those for which general controls alone cannot assure safety and effectiveness, and existing methods are available that provide such assurances. In addition to complying with general controls, Class 2 devices are also subject to special controls. A few Class 2 devices are exempt from the pre-market notification. Special controls may include special labeling requirements, mandatory performance standards and post-market surveillance. Devices in Class 2 are held to a higher level of assurance than Class 1 devices, and are designed to perform as indicated without causing injury or harm to patient or user. Examples of Class 2 devices include acupuncture needles, powered wheelchairs, infusion pumps, air purifiers, and surgical drapes. Class 3. General controls. Special controls and pre-market approval. A Class 3 device is one for which insufficient information exists to assure safety and effectiveness solely through the general or special controls sufficient for Class 1 or Class 2 devices. Such a device needs pre-market approval, a scientific review to ensure the device's safety and effectiveness. In addition to the general controls of Class 1, Class 3 devices are usually those that support or sustain human life, are of substantial importance in preventing impairment of human health, or present a potential, unreasonable risk of illness or injury. Examples of Class 3 devices that currently require a pre-market notification include implantable pacemaker, pulse generators, HIV diagnostic tests, automated external defibrillators, and endosseous implants. European Union and European Free Trade Association. The classification of medical devices in the European Union is outlined in Article 9 of the Council Directive 93/42 EEC. There are basically four classes, ranging from low risk to high risk. Class 1, Class IA, Class IIB, Class 3. The authorization of medical devices is guaranteed by a declaration of conformity. This declaration is issued by the manufacturer itself, but for products in classes IM, EA, IB or 3, it must be verified by a certificate of conformity issued by a notified body. A notified body is a public or private organization that has been accredited to validate the compliance of the device to the European Directive. Medical devices that pertain to Class 1 can be marketed purely by self-certification. The European classification depends on rules that involve the medical device's duration of body contact, invasive character, use of an energy source, effect on the central circulation or nervous system, diagnostic impact, or incorporation of a medicinal product. Certified medical devices should have the CE mark on the packaging, insert leaflets, etc. These packagings should also show harmonized pictograms and standardized logos to indicate essential features such as instructions for use, expiry date, manufacturer, sterile, don't reuse, etc. Australia. The classification of medical devices in Australia is outlined in Section 41BD of the Therapeutic Goods Act 1989 and Regulation 3.2 of the Therapeutic Goods Regulations 2002, under control of the Therapeutic Goods Administration. Similarly to the EU classification, they rank in several categories, by order of increasing risk and associated required level of control. Various rules identify the devices category, medical devices, and technological security issues. Medical devices such as pacemakers, insulin pumps, operating room monitors, defibrillators, and surgical instruments, including deep brain stimulators, can incorporate the ability to transmit vital health information from a patient's body to medical professionals. Some of these devices can be remotely controlled. This has engendered concern about privacy and security issues around human error and technical glitches with this technology. While only a few studies have looked at the susceptibility of medical devices to hacking, there is a risk. In 2008, computer scientists proved that pacemakers and defibrillators can be hacked wirelessly via radio hardware, an antenna, and a personal computer. These researchers showed they could shut down a combination heart defibrillator and pacemaker and reprogram it to deliver potentially lethal shocks, or run out its battery. J. Radcliffe, a security researcher interested in the security of medical devices, raised fears about the safety of these devices. He shared his concerns at the Black Hat Security Conference. Radcliffe fears that the devices are vulnerable and has found that a lethal attack is possible against those with insulin pumps and glucose monitors. Some medical device makers downplay the threat from such attacks and argue that the demonstrated attacks have been performed by skilled security researchers and are unlikely to occur in the real world. At the same time, other makers have asked software security experts to investigate the safety of their devices. As recently as June 2011, security experts showed that by using readily available hardware and a user manual, a scientist could both tap into the information on the system of a wireless insulin pump in combination with a glucose monitor. With the pin of the device, the scientist could wirelessly control the dosage of the insulin. Anand Raghunathan, a researcher in this study, explains that medical devices are getting smaller and lighter so that they can be easily worn. The downside is that additional security features would put an extra strain on the battery and size and drive up prices. Dr. William Meisel offered some thoughts on the motivation to engage in this activity. Motivation to do this hacking might include acquisition of private information for financial gain or competitive advantage, damage to a device, manufacturer's reputation, sabotage, intent to inflict financial or personal injury, or just satisfaction for the attacker. Researchers suggest a few safeguards. One would be to use rolling codes. Another solution is to use a technology called body-coupled communication that uses the human skin as a waveguide for wireless communication.